By all known accounts, in nearly all ways it was not a very notable meal as such. It was bland, and it lacked all seasoning, lacked leafy green vegetables, it lacked dinner rolls, and it lacked wine. It even had a deficit of proper plates and forks, and it was considered at the time to be the social failure of the year. On the Martha Stewart 0 to 10 scale of great meals, it would probably have ranked, to be generous, a 2 in preparation and a 1 in presentation. A pit had been dug in the sand, and the meat, properly undressed, was set in place. Sand was then piled over the meat to a depth of a few inches, leaving a slight depression. Dried honey mesquite and dried cottonwood limbs were then piled over the ad hoc oven and set on fire. After the fire had died down and the sand given time to cool, the cooked meal was dug up and eaten by 3 Yavapai Indian diners. Such cookouts have been considered the proper way to roast meat by the American Indians of the East Mojave Desert for dozens of generations. The most notable item of the meal in question were the 4th participant, who was laying stretched out on the desert floor, very, very dead, and the 5th, who was, coincidentally, also very dead, and was also the main entree. The Mojave American Indians call themselves Pipa Aha Makav, or the people who live by the river, or just the river people. One of their favorite pastimes used to be for their warriors to go out and kill members of neighboring tribes and capture neighbor women as slaves. This kept them strong, but it also generated many enemies. In the late 1850s, the United States Army built a fort at Beals Crossing on the Colorado and called it Fort Mojave. And they built a few redoubts along the old Makav Foot Trail that spans the length between Beals Crossing and the Cajon Pass. There was an Army redoubt at Paiute Spring, Rock Spring, Marl Spring, Soda Spring, and Cody Spring. The fort was abandoned during the American Civil War, and the redoubts were left to a handful of men to occupy. Makav valuable person Yara Tav told of the account. In the year 1866, the Makav and Yavapai were at war. In Makav terms, they would say, "Dust was in the air and eagles were dreamed of," both symbols of war. The American Civil War had ended and Fort Mojave was occupied by the Army again. The Army wanted peace among the American Indians, and the Army threatened violence against any and all tribes who were at war. That year, 1866, the USA Indian agent stationed at Parker, Arizona, was a man named George W. Lehi. He was appointed Superintendent of Indian Affairs on March 3rd, 1865, and by most accounts he was one of the few Indian agents who was a decent and honest man who treated American Indians fairly. The Makav valuable person, Yara Tav, said Lehi wanted to, quote, "do good for the Indians," unquote, and that was rare among American Indian overseers. Lehi stopped among the Makav to pick up a young man who spoke English to act as an interpreter between himself and the Yavapai, and then Lehi and the boy traveled 4 days eastward into Yavapai territory to talk about peace. Apparently the talk was unsuccessful, for Lehi and the boy left the same day, which in Indian terms is considered very insulting behavior if the guest decides to leave, or is a prelude to violence if the host tells the guest to leave. The next morning, the Yavapai attacked Lehi and killed him, and they captured the Makav boy. The Yavapai talked amongst themselves about what to do to the Makav boy for 3 days. The boy was a witness to the killing of Lehi and could not be allowed to tell the tale. So they killed him, then they cooked him, and then they ate him. As solutions went, it wasn't a very good one. News of the killing of Lehi and the eating of the Makav boy got around, and it pissed off just about everybody. The Makav wanted retribution for the insult, and the Army wanted justice, Army justice, for the killers of Lehi. As far as my research has found, in the end, the 2 killings and the 1 eating went unpunished. The army prevented the macabre from attacking the Yavapai, and the insult went unanswered. Even today, 140 years later, there are still sore feelings among some macabre about that incident. So, the next time you are near Lake Havasu and decide to have dinner at the restaurant next to the Brooklyn Bridge, check to see who the cook is. If he looks Yavapai, I suggest you order the green salad just to be safe.